cover maintenance on a ConSep 2000. So the agenda today, getting to know the ConSep 2000. We'll cover safety when you're working on it, conveyor components, the belts, the recommended maintenance schedule, basic maintenance items, the belt, the drum, the spray bar, coolant fill levels, lubrication. And you know the ConSep 2000. These safety, these are the areas you should not have your hands in or be within reach when this is powered up and operating. Stay clear of these areas. You get crushed. Identifying the parts of a ConSep 2000. There's this upper conveyor, steel belt conveyor. There's a lower conveyor. This is your drag conveyor, your fines. Rotation. Of course, the drag conveyor is going to go in a counterclockwise direction, drag and dump out of the lower strand into the chip bin. The upper conveyor goes in a clockwise direction and will dump from the top of the belt into the dumpster. Steel belt, usually perforated, drag belt underneath, your drums here. Types of belt, what you're looking for, this is a steel belt. So the components are the chain and the pans. So you're going to inspect them at times. You're going to look over everything. The things you're going to be looking for is your connections. Make sure there's nothing missing so the bars aren't falling off. Your rivets so that they're intact and not falling apart. These rollers are hard, and so are the side bars. You're also going to investigate, you're going to look at all your wings and your cleats. Lower conveyor, it's a chain. You're going to look at all the rivets again and your connecting link. And the other thing you're going to look at is your attachment. This holds the cleats on. But now we use a double attachment. Some of the older units have a single attachment. You're going to make sure that these are still solid too. Basic maintenance. On a daily basis, you should always be checking for abnormal noises, motor, belt, any part of it. Checking the coolant level, making sure that it's not overfilled or too low. Backwash, you want to make sure that the flow is proper and the screen is becoming clean. On a monthly basis, belt tension, belt condition, belt tracking and alignment, chain and hinges move freely, amp and heat reading, drain slots are clear, and look for loose bolts or set screws. Annually, worn sprockets, worn tracks, worn tail disc, drum condition, and bearing. So when you get to this point where you're looking for worn tracks and worn discs, the only way you're going to tell without taking the conveyor apart, and that's when you should really be calling us, is to look at up at the upper curve. If the tracks are worn, you'll see the side wings sagging lower than normal below the skirting. At the tail, it'll be the same thing. You'll see the side wing sagging, which means there's wear and it's dropping down. Basic makes not. Okay, you're going to take an amp and heat reading, both motors. You're going to look at the FLA for the full load amps on the motor, and then you're going to take your reading and make sure that you're still performing under the FLA. Another thing is the motor heat. So the motor typically runs at 40 degrees above ambient temperature. Anything above that is too much. So you guys will know the motor's starting to go, it's going to fail. Alignment. So on the top belt, you're going to look at the side wings. You're going to make sure that you have even spacing on both sides. Same thing over here, you're not going to look at the side wings, you're going to look at the actual chain to make sure you have even spacing on both sides. If you don't, the way to adjust this is with the set screws on the bearing. And loosen the set screws on the bearing, you're going to knock the shaft over whichever direction you need to until you have proper alignment, and then you need to retighten them. Suggested that you use 242 Loctite on the set screws before you retighten them. Again, as we talked about a little bit, inspecting the belt, again, check all the rivets, check side bars, condition of them, side wings. You're going to look for damaged side wings, bent, lifting up. Your cleats, if they're distorted, try to straighten them out. On the lower belt, same thing. Check the rivets, check your connecting link, check your attachments. Here's a little tricky. These can get bent and you can try to straighten them out, do the best you can, but it doesn't mean it always will help the problem because sometimes the chain gets twisted a little bit there and even straightening it out still never tracks true. So you might have to replace the whole thing. You'll know after you straighten it out how it tracks. When you're taking it up, let's look at the belt knowing what's loose and what's not. So yellow usually is what you see after it's been running for a while. It becomes loose, it sags down. But red is too tight. If you tighten it this far, you'll do just as much damage as if it's too loose. You'll start to prematurely stretch the belt. You'll cause wear items sooner. The ideal position is right through here, nice little give. You should be able to deflect the belt. Approximately 1/4 to 1/2 inch of deflection here would be proper tension. If you have to adjust the belt, loosen the bolts that hold the bearings down on both sides, loosen the jam nut, and either move it A or B depending on what you need to do, tighten or loosen. Now, when tightening the belt, just remember this, do not tighten one side too much because you'll get cocked, it'll get tight, and it won't be true. The belt will not run true. You'll want to tighten a little each time on each side until you get the desired tension. And make sure they're even. We measure from inside here to the front of the bearing. Do not measure from the head section back. It's not accurate. Measure from here to there. It's the most accurate way to make sure these are even. That's important. Here's a video. Going to push up. You'll see a deflection. In a minute, you'll see it better over here because you'll see the side wing move. You see the side wing move up and down, see the deflection? So you want to be able to move it that easily with a finger. 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of deflection is a sweet spot. Same thing on the lower belt as far as adjusting it, except for you're going to take your measurement from a different location. You're going to pull a cleat up to where it's just between the sprocket and the track. You want to be in this spot right about here. And you want to push on that cleat to see how your belt reacts. This belt is better, a little tighter, so I would say 1/4 inch of deflection is probably just right. Go through the same procedure as far as adjusting and locking it down. You're examining and checking the cleanliness of the spray bar and your screen. So it's just like Goldilocks. Too much is no good, too little's no good, just right's great. So we want just enough coolant to come through here to clean the screen. Too much creates foam and agitation, unnecessary problems in the drum area. Too little will not get the screen clean and you'll overflow. You'll see a pattern coming through, bubbling up through here as long as it's clean and it's just coming up high enough to get the screen clean after it goes by. Now, if you're looking at the top and you don't see a pattern going all the way across because the nozzles will fan out, so it should bubble up in a line across. If you're seeing it only on one end, that means there's clogs. That means that the nozzles and the purge are clogged and it's starting to back up through there. It means you're going to have to clean the spray bar. To adjust the spray bar, there's a valve at the backwash pump. This is where you make your adjustment as you look through the window and just find the sweet spot. If you got to look at the drum all the way around to make sure the screen's not damaged. You're going to work through this window. You take these windows off, and you look through here as you rotate the screen. You're going to check for torn areas. You're going to look for loose bolts, fasteners have fallen out. The bands have slid off, and the outside edges are no longer tight and got contamination. Here are the components. This is your outside hose bands. It's critical that these are tight and all the way to the outside. They have to be up against the dummy disc here and up against the sprocket here. Screen has to be completely to the outsides underneath the bands. Hold downs. We want these tight, and on the one side it's just holes. That's the side you usually start when you're putting the screen on. And the other side is slots, but you have to pull it tight before you lock them down because you do not want the opening on the inside where it can contaminate the drum. You want it up top, or if it's exposed, there's nowhere it's going. It's not going anywhere on you. Here's a close-up of all the components. Here's what I'm talking about on the outside. We want the band to ride on here. If you do have a contaminated screen or any other thing that's going on that can allow contamination inside this drum area, when you go to put a new screen on, you must clean this drum area completely. And when you're working on it, to put a new screen on, make sure that the coolant, any contaminants are below the drum. You don't want to pull the screen on and pull all the contaminants in there. Then you've just contaminated everything all the way through. Make sure you do it clean, start fresh. You'll probably have to clean the tank if something happened. Example, you start in the band here. He's going to slide it all the way to the outside. Here's where I was talking about the openings. You see how the screen's been pulled tight? The openings are to the inside here, not allowing any out this way. If they're this way and you're not pulled tight enough, contaminants can get inside the drum. Here's when it's all the way over. Now what you have to do is you have to run, so you snug this clamp up. You don't tighten it completely. Snug these up, and you turn the drum in a complete rotation, and if you have to, you keep pushing it out to the outside. When it's completely to the outside, all the way around is when you tighten this all the way up. And see, this is how tight it has to be to the side. There's a close-up of the band when it's completed. Here's the opening again to the inside, nothing to the outside. This is where we need to make sure that the flow from the upper conveyor to the lower conveyor is not impeded, because you will overflow. You'll have the overflow in the upper conveyor. You'll know that there's a problem here. It's different than just overflowing the whole system. It's just through the upper conveyor, the drum area is still low, and you'll see it high here, but the drum area is low. These slots here are the transfer of the coolant after the first line of filtration, which is your upper belt. The upper belt is your first line of filtration. The upper belt is usually perforated. It's traveling through here, and that's going to take the chips down to finer chips. This is the workhorse. It's going to take all the larger chips. Finer chips fall into the drag, and they have to have this path to get to the drag. Coolant. Surprising enough, most of the problems we get are from people overfilling a system. Not from underfilling. They usually know when it's underfilled. They panic and realize they have to fill it. But the operators tend to fill the system while it's running. Well, there's a problem there. When you start out, you're starting out approximately, this is just an example, by the way. This is just, don't pay attention to the numbers. But when you start out, an inch below the cover is usually the ideal spot when it's not running, okay? But when it's running and all the pumps kick on, it's going to drop down. So that, when you first turn it on and everything kicks on, is when you should mark on your tank operating range. Because if an operator wants to put coolant in, he needs to know not to fill it past that point. Because if the machine shuts off, Now there's too much coolant in the system and it's going to overflow everywhere. The other thing it does is it prevents everything from working as intended. The upper conveyor, the coolant has to flow through nice and clean into the lower conveyor and then out the drum. If everything's too high, it will not flow smoothly. It'll be slow. You can get the flooding over, as well as if you have any foam, it's going to become a real problem. Grease, it's a 206, 208. Here's what happens. Most people over-grease a bearing. You only have to put a little bit of grease in each time. You're going to go over there and just give it a little pop. You don't want to over-grease. Over-greasing is worse than under-greasing. It'll heat up the bearing, cause problems, break the seals, ruin the bearing prematurely. When to call Mayfran. There's more than just standard maintenance required. If you're aggravated, you've come to a point where, hey, I've tried everything that you guys talked about, everything in the manual, I just can't do it, call us. We got technicians that are very skilled and can do this stuff in a short period of time. You've tried everything, problems still exist. The application has caused problems out of the ordinary. Now, there you can talk to us about a few items that we can probably help you out with. Every application is different. There's no two the same. And we can help you with maybe accessories or things you could do to modify how it operates that might help you in this situation. You don't have the manpower. You're limited on time being offline. Like I said, we have very skilled guys that can come in and do a PM and change out and keep it minimal on the amount of downtime. They can do all the work in a quick period of time. He has a lot of hours and it seems like it needs a complete PM and inspection evaluation of the unit. After an older unit, like I said, the tracks start to wear, other items start to wear out, the tail disc's not easy to see. You call us, we come in, we do a thorough, we pull the whole belt out, we look at everything, we can tell you the condition, whether it's worth repairing or replacing it as necessary. Now, when you do call us, here's where to reach us. Now, here are some of the things I was talking about, options that we can help you with. Let's say your spray bar does get clogged once in a while because someone removes tank covers and chips get inside. It overflows and chips get inside. You're tired because the spray bar is not easy to clean. It's a pain in the butt. We put this inline strainer that polices the coolant heading into the backwash so that it's going to catch those particles that might clog your backwash ahead of time. You can purchase this. We have a setup. We sell it to you. You install it right in between the pump and the spray bar. Another item, you got a lot of carryback. Coolant's foamy, heavy concentration because you're tooling an operation you're doing. A lot of carryback, it just piles up, eventually starts stopping the conveyor because it's pulling it right back in and it's just jamming the conveyor. We sell an air knife kit. Comes with a curtain, the mounting bracket for the regulator and the air knife. All just bolt right on to the end. The whole thing's set. And then you just bring your air in. It's all set. Here's another situation where we have this fuzzy wuzzy, okay? In the inside of your drum and the outside of your drum, you see these prickly things all the way through. This is a situation where you have a chip that's just like a needle tip. It's a little wiry thing, and it goes through, and it gets stuck in the screen, okay? And you can see where it really builds up. And if you have a situation like this, we have an option. We have a different type of screen. It's more expensive, but it takes care of this because it's got a finer layer that lets it's even smaller opening, so these things can't get through, and then it's got a reinforcement on the back side of it. The only problem is you have to watch what your backwash pump is capable of doing. We would tell you you might have to upgrade your backwash pump or use a physical brush on the screen at that point. But it's an option if this is a common problem for you and they're getting in and not only do they make it in here like this, think about the ones that break off and fall into the system. It happens. Another problem, you got chips that are stringy and like to ball up. They don't go nowhere. They just tumble until they become a big snowball like this. Or you have long string chips. What we have is a rake kit. We have a clean off, which sits up here that's going to pull everything off. And we have rakes, depending on how many you need, we attach these to the belt. You can buy the whole kit. You can do it yourself too. And depending on how much you have and what you need, most of the time we get away with 2 or 3 in a whole conveyor. And this will grab this before it builds up too big and help bring it up where it'll get cleared off. If you have long stringy chips, it'll pull it up, and this will do a tug of war and win the battle. Okay, I have a question about chips getting around the pump. So, of course, if chips are getting into the tank, of course you're going to see them near the pump. It's sucking them right to the pump. So the problem is you have some where there's an opening. If the screen is attached correctly, there's no way chips can get through the conveyor. The conveyor body is solid other than the opening for the screen. They're either getting in by overflowing, or there's an open area on the tank, or it's not sealed up correctly to the machine and there's an open area right there. I've seen many times where it's not just right up to it and there's open areas that if the chips can overflow the feed area and fall into the tank. A lot of times it also happens when people take lids off because they want to fill it and they don't put them back on, or they take lids and throw them to the side so they can see the coolant. Well, when you have open lids, of course, chip bins get full, they dump. It's just normal traffic. You get chips in there. I mean, it happens. So the one question was on 5-axis I-800. So I would look at the interface between the conveyor and the tank on that one, and right up to the machine. That's where I'd be looking. Let's see. I have can I run casts all the time in a ConSep? Well, okay. ConSep will do casts, but it's not ideal for casts. The cast, if you're doing all casts, you really need to think about changing out to a mag sub. It's ideal for a cast application. ConSep will do it, but keeping the screen clean is a lot tougher. You got casts, if you stop it, you know, let's say you stop it for a few days, you know, cast sets up. There's a lot of spots in the ConSep where that stuff can get, you know, pretty stiff and cause other problems. It's not the ideal choice. If you were doing cast and something else, then you might use it with the hybrid, and we have where we can put some magnets in the lower conveyor. But if you're doing all casts, I would suggest you see someone about a mag sub. Question about the spray bar getting clogged, and it says that they even put a filter, but it depends on what kind of filtration you're doing. If you have an inline filter and it's the proper mesh or size, there's no way it should happen. You got contamination getting from somewhere if it's getting there. And if it's that small too, it could be, you know, is the coolant clean? Because a lot of times what we see with older coolant is it gets gummy, and all it has to do is be on the chips and enough of it just start to build a paste inside the spray bar. If that's the problem, I mean, that's something we've seen. But for chips big enough to start the whole clogging by themselves, there's a purge on the end of the spray bar. It's larger than the nozzles, and it keeps it moving through it. It has to be big enough to clog that. So I don't know, the inline strainer should have solved all those problems. If you're getting stuff through there, maybe you have like needle-like chips that are making through all the openings, and they're long enough that they turn sideways once they get in there. Or you have some kind of gumminess in there from coolant or anything on the parts, paint on the parts, anything that could cause some kind of gumminess will cause a problem. So as far as when I referred to, you know, hybrid, the flex unit, someone asked, what is that? So our flex unit is basically a ConSep with a magnetic bed on the lower conveyor. It's to help pull cast out of the coolant and try to separate it. It's good if you're doing multiple things on the machine, but if you're doing 100% cast, like I said, you really should go to the mag sub. Can you replace the lower unit with a flex? Yeah, you can. Yep, mates up the same way. The replacement conveyor would meet up the same way. The only difference would be probably the distance of height, because we have to allow for the magnetic bed that sits underneath it, so it will raise it in the tank a little bit. But if you have the room, it's not a problem. Like I said, feel free to contact us if you come up with anything. So you can reach my department if you email the service department directly. So it's service@mayfran.com. And that'll come right to me and my guys. Okay? All right, everybody. Thank you. Bye.